So before probably others will join too. So till that, let me explain what we do today and why we do it. So our goal here today is to create an organic shape like this penguin from a basic polygonal model. The technique we will use here is called box modeling, and we will use a subdivision technique. So what does it mean? We will start from a very simple box. We will divide it. We will insert edges and adding details as we are going and progressing forward. And to create a smooth surface, we will add a subdivision modifier. This is called Turbo Smooth to get a fairly nice and smooth out result. Now, the goal of this lesson is to get used to navigating the 3D space, to understand the difference between edges, points, vertices, and polygons, and when we are using them and why we are using them. Okay, so when you are preparing a reference image, just like as it is shown in Photoshop, you have to make sure that the images are matching. So if you have your own character drawing and you want to create that character, or you have something from the internet and references and you want to do that, please make sure that the images, the sizes are matching. So if the figure's arm is at this length on the front view, make sure that that's the same length is appearing on the side view. Okay. Usually, even if the character itself is not symmetrical perfectly, the foundation, the reference image is easier if you start with a symmetrical reference image, and, because it's really straining on the eye at the beginning. So I have the same thing here. The figure, the penguin, is perfectly symmetrical except the head. The head is a little bit tilted, but other than that, the front, the body is mirrored. Okay, now let me switch to 3dsmax. So I hope you downloaded and you have it already available. So this is the scene, what I have, and I will go through what you see here and why you see that. So we have this blue box, and that will be the center of the body. And as it is slightly smaller than the penguin's overall body, so you don't have to create at the same height as the whole penguin and the head and everything, because usually the head, the smaller parts, will be extruded from the main body. Okay, so when you are selecting something, if you have a figure, look for the biggest volume you can start with and create that and extrude from there, expand the model from there, build from there. So this is why the wings are not included. This is just covering basically the body. So there are no segments yet. Before we are jumping in the modeling, let me show you the pictures you see there. So Alt-W to maximize the viewport, and the images are loaded as textures. So the plays, these are simple plays. If you take a look at the screen explorer, the scene explorer, you can see that we have a box 001 and a plane and plane 2. And good news, but you have to keep it in mind that these are frozen. So anytime when you want to load in a picture as a reference, it's a good idea to freeze it. Why? Because if you accidentally select the model and you move it away, it can cause troubles. It will be hard to find where the original position was, and it's a little bit frustrating. So please, you can freeze them down. I have a detailed tutorial about setting up the whole scene. Right now, I want you to jump in and look for the modeling mostly, but I will cover the main principles. So here we have a frozen column. So if you want to freeze, for example, the box, you can freeze it from here. This is the snowflake icon. So if you untick the snowflake, then you will be able to select the picture. And yes, then you will be able to accidentally rotate this. Now, if you take a look, I have a guideline. So 2 green guidelines that helps me to center the image. Let me move this away. So the image is centered. thanks to these guidelines. So here it is. Here's the origin, and these guidelines can help me to align the whole thing. Okay, let me freeze these. I don't want to accidentally move them or select them. And it is time to show you how you can access to the pictures. So if there is a problem with loading a picture, or if you want to manipulate or change a picture, you can use the material editor. So this semester we will not use it that much, but as an understanding, you can choose the icon. Here's the icon, material editor. The hotkey is M. And right now, I was using in the previous class of 3dsmax, so it opens with the compact material editor. The compact material editor is slightly smaller, a little bit more tight, a little bit more organized, but it is easier on the screen space, so this is why I like to use it. If you have the slate editor, the bigger one, you can always switch from the modes and slate material editor. So you can switch back. This is the slate editor. This was also good, but for simply adjusting textures, it's not a necessity. Okay, so this is the material editor. And if you want to load or change a texture, you can do it by selecting the material you're looking for. So this is the side view. So I can click and select it. There's this diffuse channel. And within the diffuse channel, we have a map loaded. Now, if you never worked with 3D, this channel thing and diffuse, it's just, oh, it's too much. So imagine that you have a hotel and you have different floors and different corridors. And within one corridor with plenty of rooms, one room is for the overall coloration. The other room is the shininess. And when you adjust something, you have to go into that room and make the adjustments, and then leaving the room and go back to the reception. All right, so go back to the foundation. This is how it works. We have kind of a doors we can go into, make the editing, and then we can leave and go back. So how does it work in practice? So here's the diffuse. This is kind of a corridor, and this is the room I'm looking for. This is the bitmap. So if I'm pressing this tiny little M button, I can press it, and now it enters me in that room where I can edit the basic principles of the texture. So for example, I can adjust the tiling, that be set back to 1. Even if I want, I can rotate it. So, and changing angles. So I have a kind of a basic control over the appearance and the position of the texture. And of course, if I want to check the image, there's this view image button. So view image, and here, this is the big load button. So if you want to change or something disappearing and you have to manually select the picture, you can do it here. All right, now how to leave the room. This go to parent option is the leave the room. So this is how you can go back up to the top level. And one tiny note that you should listen to. It's a kind of a warning that when you have a crowded scene loaded, and the scene is huge in size and you have plenty of textures, sometimes you don't want to see all the textures simultaneously. It slows down the work, it slows down the animation, so it is really hard to work with. So this is the reason why we have show shaded in the viewport. So this option is turning on and off the textures in the viewport. So if you have a couple thousands of tree leaves, you don't want to see all the tree patterns or all the leaf patterns, then you can turn this off and save some memory and save some time. But in this case, because we are using a reference, we want to keep it on. So show shaded material in viewport is ticked, and now we have it. Okay, now let me close. By pressing M, it will close back. So it is a toggle type of button. So M opens it up, M pressing again, Marta, like Marta, it will close back up. Okay, so what you see here is a simple box. and there is nothing to be edited yet. We have to convert it into a 3D model that's editable. The keyword here is editable, and we will choose a polygonal model, so Editable Poly will be chosen. The goal here is when you are using a specific model type, you have built-in tools, and the vast amount of tools attached to Editable Poly. So it will be a little bit daunting at first. There's plenty of different tools, but believe me, many things are just appearing multiple times. So they are the same. You can see it here and there, etc. So, but before we are jumping in, let me split up the model. So how and what? The goal here is we want to do the least amount of work. So we are working only on one side of the figure. I like to work on the right side of the figure. So I will create an edge that's running across, and then I will convert it into an editable poly, and then I can delete the polygons. Now how to do it? Function key 4, or edge faces. So edge faces can help me to see the edges. And we have some segments, especially the width segments, and I've just changed it to 2. Why? Because there's only 2 segments are needed, because it will generate a single cut in the middle, and I will be able to select this side of the model and completely delete it. Okay, so when we have this one, you can convert it into Editable Poly. Now here comes the first option, option A, option 2. You can go in the modifier stack and press right click, and here we are, convert to Editable Poly. Okay, Editable Poly, that's it. Right click here. Or you can select the model and right click in the viewport, and in the pop-up menu, the very bottom option will offer the same things. So here's converted Editable Poly. This is the top, it's the second of them all. Now, before we are moving on, the difference between mesh and poly is you have, when you're using a mesh, it's a smaller file size. It's more optimized for creating real-time elements. Some tools are included in mesh and not included in poly. But usually for standard animation and screening, we are using polygonal models. If you have to work directly for game models, then you might want to use meshes, but this is a whole different animal. So we will use Editable Poly. And now this is what happens. So if you haven't seen the change, let me repeat this. So let me undo and look at the top ribbon. So if you don't have the ribbon available, so if you don't see this kind of a thick bar that shows a couple of commands, you might want to enable the button, so show ribbon. If it is already highlighted and showing this blue highlight, that's okay. Sometimes 3dsmax closes up the ribbon by default. There is a very tiny minimize button, and you can open this up, but here's the little issue that when you click on this tiny button, you have to wait a couple of seconds until 3dsmax is redrawing the whole viewport. So because the 3D software is using so many things and recreates the whole set time of the time, it takes a couple of seconds to load all the tools. Okay, and when we are converting it again to an editable poly, it will show the tools available regarding to editable poly. So this ribbon is content aware. So whenever you switch to something, it will show the tools available for that level, that mode, that element, whatever. So let me just show this. And right now, I need to go in the edit mode. So if you remember that the edit mode is by clicking on a sub-object. So when you are under the hood, when you're clicking on any of these icons, or pressing 1 is the vertex, 2 is edge, or you can even choose right click and border, right click, and polygon. So you can choose from here, you can choose from here, you can use right click, you can even go in the top side and choose these icons, okay? So practically the scene is crowded with the same thing, okay? So when you feel a little bit overwhelmed, you don't have to, these are just repeated icons for different user interface upgrades. And it's true for many, many big softwares. Okay, now the goal here is to remove the polygons. Removing polygons is nothing fancy, it is just deleting. So I will drag a window and select all the polygons on this side. Okay, so I'm removing the figure's left side. Okay, the figure's left side. It's not the director side, it's figure's left side. But every time you select something, please make a habit of rotating and checking what you have selected. Okay, once you're getting better with the selection and the navigation, it will be easier. But if you are at the beginning, selecting and rotation can help you to inspect what's going on. And right now I'm pretty satisfied, so I can just press the delete button and remove completely everything. So delete and boom, removed. Great. Okay, now what's next? I definitely have to add details because my goal here is to make this box looking like the penguin. The first step to make something similar is to follow the silhouette, follow the proportions. Now, how to get to the silhouette, how to look for that? First, we want to make it see-through. So we want to see the model and the reference image at the same time. And the other thing is we have to add details. We have to add geometry. Now, the see-through mode is nothing special but Alt-X. So Alt key and X, and if you press it, it will make it see-through. And if you press it again, Alt-X, it will get back your shaded model. So it's really a handy way to make the model temporarily visible. There are other options to do this, but this is the fastest and the most reliable way. Now, I can't trace the model because if I'm selecting vertices, the points, and I'm selecting these points, there's not much information. I can't really trace everything because I'm just pulling the top edge and that's it. So what I have to do, I have to divide this area with more crossing edges. And the keyword here is edge. And how to create a new edge, one way, and it's quite a popular one, is to connect existing edges. But edges should be parallel, okay? So when you have edges selected that are vertical, for example, so let me go to edge level. So Editable Poly, edge level, I'm selecting all the edges. Don't forget selection, rotate. Make sure you see Alt-X because we want to make sure that the back facing edge is also selected. And then I will be able to use connect. Connect is connecting perpendicularly. Okay? So now, where is this connect? And how to find it and how to use it. So if you look at the right side, here's the very first way, the old school way to connect something. But if you just hit it, it will connect only once. So let me show this. This is what happens. This is just one edge. Come on, it's not enough. We need at least 3 of these. So what we can do is we can go in here, and every time you see the connect, and you see right next to the connect, right next to the command, you see this tiny little window appearing that is the operation with the setting. So if I'm clicking on that, it will tell me that connect edges, a dialog will appear, and this is an interactive dialog. It is so interactive. Just let me show this because oftentimes if you click it away, this is what happens. The dialog is still there. It still shows something, but nothing happens. Why? Because I was accidentally clicking with my left mouse button somewhere outside the model. So I have to select again my points, again my edges, the vertical edges, and if I want to make more, at least 3 segments, I can just crank up the value. Okay. Now, the other typical issue comes when you just close it because you have to accept it first. All right. So click on the checker and then it will be performed. All right. Because it's an interactive window, so you can keep it open. But in this case, we don't want to do this. Yeah. So what's changed? Because we created new edges, we have new vertices. We have more control points to trace the silhouette of the penguin. It's not just a simple box anymore. We can actually try to trace the silhouette of the model from the side. So which one is the side view? The left view. So I'm just pressing L and look for the left view. And because I don't see it perfectly, I have to choose F4, function key 4, to see the wires. And now I will be able to select more items. Here comes something that should be mentioned. So let me switch to vertex mode. Vertex mode is great to select vertices and pull them and trace the silhouette. So this is what we do practically. But be careful. What we do is not that self-explanatory because we are selecting 2 points in the 3D space. You are looking at side view, but let me go back to the 4 views and let me change the sizes of the viewport. Okay, now you will be able, what I'm doing. So here we are, this is the 3D view. And when you are clicking on the left view and just clicking on a point, it can select only a single point. But if you want to really trace this model, you have to select both points, okay? This is why I'm using a window. So I'm dragging a window, I'm in move mode, selecting and pulling it out. And as you see in the perspective viewport, now the 2 points are moving along together, and now I can keep it fairly organized. What happens if you just start moving a point? This is what happens. So this poor penguin will be kind of it will be an odd chest. So a kind of a suction will appear in the chest. So this is why you have to be careful and always check the 3D report. Always check what you're doing, because when you recognize in time, it's much easier to go back and fix the problems. Okay, now so let me do this. Here's the neck area. Here's the belly. Pull this one a little bit back. Maybe these 4, so these are 4 points. These are too low, so I will lift them up a little bit and select only the front 2 points and pull them back. Pull them back. Okay, now it's tracing. It's not perfect, but we will add smoothing. We will add subdivision. And subdivision will help us to break down these segments and make it much more rounded and nice. And the silhouette will be a flowing silhouette. So let me go to the back side. So selecting the back points, and I'm pulling this and pushing this one, this too, and actually I can pull this. So the tail should be starting from here, but right now I'm not worried about the tail and not worried about the legs. We are just focusing on the main shape. And what we did is we perfected the left view. I think we still miss a line, but we will add that on with a different tool. But if I take a look at the front, we still have to fix up a couple of things. So definitely the neck is too big. Again, these are 2 points. 1 point is covering the other. This is why I'm dragging a window and pulling it closer to the center, selecting this one and pulling this outside, giving some room for the belly, and pulling this back a little bit and pulling this one closer to the body. And now this is what happens. So we have a shape like this. Okay, now this is just a simple empty shell. It is only 1/2. It is not even rounded. So, okay, I understand that there's this tracing thing, and we made the tracing from the left view. And yes, I know that, okay, the front view is good, but where's the smoothing part? Where's the subdivision? Where's the symmetry? Now, this is time to add symmetry and add subdivision to make it work and to visualize the final smooth version. So let me maximize the viewport, Alt-W, maximizing the viewport, and I'm turning off this see-through mode, so Alt-X is pressed. We have this nice blue shade, and good news, we have to add modifiers. But be careful when you're adding modifiers. 90%, if you have no direct reason, always leave editing mode. So how do you know you are in editing mode? Whenever you are in editing mode, an icon appears next to the name of the editable poly. So it shows I'm on edge level. Even if it is closed, it shows I'm on edge level. Why is it important? Because I can add a modifier, and the modifier, if there is a pending selection, the modifier should be affected by the pending selection, okay? It is a tool that's working great in animation, but it's for modeling, usually we would avoid that. Now, how to avoid it? Let me delete just the modifier. I can press the right click, usually for deleting, removing, converting. 90% is just the right click. So, and delete. And click it on the name of Editable Poly. Now, there is no icon, so everything is clean. And from the modifier list, let me call the symmetry modifier now. And there is no icon, but something weird happened. The model completely disappeared. Honestly, there's no problem here. It happens because the symmetry does not know which side you want to mirror. So right now there is 1/2 and there is an empty side of the model. So here the symmetry simply mirrors the empty side. And this is why you don't see anything of the model. So you have to flip over and make sure that the shell is mirrored to the opposite side. For that, we will use the flip option. And voila, we have this nice and rounded, not rounded yet, but we have the solid body for the penguin. Okay, now, so what else? It is still not rounded, it is still not softened up, so we definitely need another modifier. And that modifier will be the turbo smooth. But before we are jumping on that, let me show you something. If you experience an error and you see that flipping is not working properly, you can choose and check by yourself the mirror axis. Sometimes you have to switch the axis. Okay, so you can mirror up and down, left, right, front, and back. Right now, the X and flipped version is the working version. And if something crazy happens, there is a sub-object level of the symmetry itself. So the symmetry modifier itself has an editable mode, an edit mode. And when you are selecting that, you can move the center of symmetry. So if the model is too thick, you might want to use this as a cheat to quickly change up things. But let me undo this. I don't want to mess up the center of mirror because it looks perfect. Okay, so the next modifier is the turbo smooth. So I'm pressing T, and it's at the end of the row, and this is how it looks. So it is creating a fairly nice, soft, rounded shape for the figure. But actually, what we have and what we are modeling is this one. Okay, so that is the trick. This is where we can make our life a little bit easier. We have a fairly low resolution model, but at the end, it will look like a nice and clean model. By default, the iteration number is set to 1. If you want to make it even smoother, you can crank it up, but be careful. It is not spin and drag. It is just selecting and typing or just pressing once, because it can drastically increase the polygon count of the software. Okay, so be careful with it. Now, this is a nice rounded central shape. So what we have to do is make sure that this is representing the figure body. So it is, we will check it from the top, we'll check it from the bottom and see if it's rounded enough to make it look nice. And then when we corrected that, we can progress forward and we'll try to create the wings. All right, now, so for that, let me look at the top view. And what I see, I don't like it that much. My problem with that is because I was starting from a box, because I was starting from a blocky surface, it is still not that circular cross-section. It has no circular cross-section. A penguin is not looking like this. We almost have edges around here, okay? This is just looking odd. So what we need to do, we have to tweak the position of the points to make sure that the shape is a little bit more rounded. Now, how to do it? Of course, we have to go back to the vertex level, but my problem is I am on the vertex level, but I want to see the end result. I want to see how my changes will take effect and what will happen at the end. And for that, I want to turn on the show end result to show everything that's coming up in a hierarchy. So for that, the button here is this chemistry tube. So when you click on the chemistry tube, you still see the low resolution mesh, now indicated in yellow in this orangish color. So that means you can adjust. So I have to select the points, and once the points are selected, I can make and change the position, and it will update in live. Now, to select the points, let me go to the top view, and I will drag a window, and I will guess. I don't know if all the points are selected perfectly, so I will just try to make these, but I will just move it closer. Now here comes something that I was not being aware of. So as I start moving, can you see how the shape is changing? It is changing. It is much more rounded at the top and the chest area. So we are watching from the top view. This is the chest area. This is the back area. So the back area is nice and rounded. The chest area is a little bit blocky on this side. But as I move these points, the overall thickness is off. So what I have to do, I have to keep the width and make sure that the figure is not flattening. It will not make narrow. It will not change it to be there, being narrow. So what I have to do, I have to insert a couple edges. Now let me go back and look for a way to create edges a little bit faster than previous time. Previous time, what we did was the connect. Connect is great because you have an accurate control on how many edges you create. But if your goal is just to place edges and you're just eyeballing the things, there's another method that's fairly effective and really a smooth way. Now to do it, let me turn off F4. And the tool is called Swift Loop. Swift Loop. Okay, so Swift Loop is, you can find it only on the ribbon. So you cannot find it anywhere else. It is only placed here, and this is what it makes. You can highlight an area, and you can place an edge. Here I will place an edge horizontally. Here I will place an edge vertically because my goal is to maintain this dimension. So when I'm pulling these points, I want to keep the thickness, the overall thickness of the figure the same. Okay, now let me go back, and first, before we are moving on, let me correct these edges. So left view, Alt X, and pull these to trace the figure. Go to the front view and also pull these. And now I will be able to select these vertices in the top. And as you see, I am rotating because it is hard to see what is selected if you don't rotate. Now my goal is to select all the points from the top till the toe and pull it closer to the center in all directions, like X and Y too. And I will do the same with the front area. So let me turn on see-through mode. Right now I'll use the control. This is the slower but more reliable way to select all the points. So control, let me turn off the show end result, and then see the points I've selected. And I'm pulling these closer to the center and back up a little bit. And as you see, when I'm going back to the turbo smooth, it is much more rounded. All right, we can still make adjustments, but right now it is good as it is. Here comes the second part, is we need to create a foundation for the wings. Because there are polygons here and there, but if you know there is an arm, and the arm should be placed somewhere at an exact location, you have to prepare, you have to create the ground for that extrusion. Now, if I turn off this show end result and go into the edge mode, for example, this is the edge that I was using as a splitting center edge, so I was creating with the Seethrough. I have something in mind that I should look for a polygon that is placed somewhere here. But there is no polygon there. So what I need to do is somehow I have to select the edge, but it is already selected in my case, but I will show how to select the whole. And if I'm splitting up the edge, I can create a polygon in between the newly created gap. So when you have an edge, a single edge, and that is split up, it can generate a polygon in between. So this is what I will do, and that will be the perfect foundation for the arm. Now, what happens if you have no selection? First of all, because it is an edge operation, you have to have edge mode selected. So the subdivision is an edge. The sub-object is edge level. And here comes the selection trick. So you can go in and if you have time, you can hold down control and click one by one. But if you select an edge and hold down shift and click on the next, it can select everything in a row. Or even faster, you can double click and that will select everything in a row. Okay, so what is in the loop, that will be selected. So the edges will be selected in the continuity. There's a different type of selection, that is the ring selection. So if you have a single edge selected and you select a ring, it will select everything that's parallel to that edge. All right, so when you're creating a color, when you're creating a belt, when you're creating a shirt or whatever for your figure, you might want to use and choose this type of selection. Right now, double clicking, selecting all the edges that's vertically aligned and flowing, and go to right click and choose chamfer. So, but not a simple chamfer, please pay attention to this. We are looking for chamfer with settings. And that tiny little icon right beside the name of the chamfer is the chamfer with settings. So this is what it brings up. Let me close this and let me show it where, if you're looking for somewhere else, you can also find it here. So here's this chamfer icon. You can open up chamfer with settings and that's the same. Or you can even go here and chamfer with settings. All right, it's up to you. So if you don't want to see this because you're working on a laptop screen, you can always use right click and chamfer. Right now, the wing of the penguin is, the width is a little bit, it's like a landscape-oriented rectangle. So if I'm creating something like this, it is not exactly what I'm looking for. So what I want to keep the planar surface that's running parallel to the body. So that for this reason, I need to increase the chamfer amount. So make the polygons wider, the appearing polygons wider. Don't forget, if you're ready and if you were to accept this, you have to check the checker. And then a freshly created polygon becomes available. So this is the polygon I can start working with. Now the polygon is still in portrait mode. I want to make it lay down. So what to do? It's kind of a cheaty, but it's really a fast way to do this. You can actually scale down polygons. So good news, you already know to rotate, move, scale things, but you can actually scale parts within a model. So it's not just scaling a teapot or scaling a sphere, you can actually scale a simple single selected polygon. So let me go, press R, the hotkey for scaling, or the icon here is the uniform scale, or right click and scale. And I will just iron it down. So I will just push it down by selecting the Z-axis and stretching it out along the Y-axis. And now I have a little bit of widened polygon surface I'm looking for. But it is a little bit canted. It's a little bit much more like a rhomboid shape. So if I want to make a correction and I want to skew it back, what I have to do is just to go to edge mode, for example, or vertex mode, select this edge, switch to move, and pull this edge. And now I have a foundation for this. Okay, so this will be the foundation for the wings. Okay, now, before we are moving on, let me explain how extrusion is working. So we want to, this is the kind of the shoulder joint area. Right now it's flat. From the surface, we want to extrude another one. And that will be the extension of the arm, in the wing in this case. But by default, the extrusion is always perpendicular to the polygon. So if the polygon is angled in the 3D space, it will just create the arms like this in the upside manner. So if you want to extrude pointing them downwards, you have to rotate the polygon around. This is one thing. The other thing is, but it's easier if I show this. So let me go back to polygon level, select the polygon I have, go to extrusion, and just testing it out, how the extrusion looks like, and turning on the show and result because I want to see the final solution. Now, I have two issues with this. One issue is the orientation. The second issue is there is no transition between the shapes, or actually there's too much of a transition between the shapes. So it's not really believable anatomically. It's like a sugar coating something. So it just covers the shapes and the details. So instead of directly extruding from the surface we created, we should create another level like like an adapter for the foundational shape. So let me undo this, Ctrl Z. Let me turn off the show and result. And first, let me tilt this polygon a little bit by choosing the rotation. So E, like Elvira. So I can rotate this polygon. This will help me regarding to the orientation of the arm. So if the polygon is tilted a little bit, right now it could be good for a T-pose, for example. And the step we are looking for is called inset. Inset is available at the top or right click, same things true here as well. So let me click on inset, going on. As the polygon selected, the cursor changes and shows that if I'm pressing down the left mouse button, I can drag and it will create a kind of shrunk down polygon and a frame around the polygon. Now this frame is changing up the density of the geometry. So we have fairly big polygons around, but when we have tiny polygons like this, it will definitely, let me rotate this slightly, even more. Now I'm going to the extrusion, extrude it a little bit, and test it out, what happens. Can you see the change? Okay, so now the wing has a kind of a joint, a transitional shape between the body and the wing, and now I have more control on the position of the wing, and it is also good for if we want to move it. All right, now you might already noticed, but it's not a so common thing. When you create an arm, it's not the best idea to create the arm right away in full length, okay? Because it's much easier, much harder. So if you have an arm in full length and you want to later add on the details like the elbow, the change of the bicep, whatever, it is much harder to control everything. If you want to make it fairly easy, it's better if you are extruding small, make corrections, make sure the extrusion is working properly, the cross section is promising, and then extrude again, and then extrude again. So it's like unfolding the figure. It's like growing the figure, all right? Just like a plant, it's not one day, it has to take time. So for this reason, let me look at the 3D space. Let me look how this wing is created. So if I'm turning to the side, and here's the wing. The penguin's wing is not completely parallel with the ground. It is slightly rotating in the 3D space. So it starts here, but as the wing extrudes further, there is a slight rotation. And this is why there is this powerful movement of the penguin. So what I need to do is to go to the front menu, front viewport, and look, I still have the polygon selected. I'm just switching to the front, and I'm pulling it down and switching to rotation, and make sure that the polygon is actually angled somewhat 90 degree with the shaft, and I can even slightly rotate this. All right, so okay, this is one way to add some interesting design to the wings. It's not just a flat extruded surface. It is, as we're progressing, we will always slightly rotate to create this really 3D shape and really good looking model. But if you look at the picture reference, the wing itself is not that meaty. It is a little bit of a thinner geometry. How to create thinner geometry? Because we have this kind of a thick polygon, and yeah, I know we can extrude it further, but it is time to address this issue, make sure that the proportions are looking nice, and then we can progress forward with the extrusion. Now, how to extrude that? Let me turn off the show end results. Let me go Alt-W, F4. So this is where we are. So my goal is to somehow change the thickness of the polygon, because it's like a fat fish finger. So to make it a little bit more blade-like look, I have to select, for example, the edge. And again, you can scale down every element. If you select 2 points, vertices, you can scale them. If you select edges, you can scale them. If you select a polygon, you can scale them, stretch them. So use it as you wish. Now, if I've scaled it uniformly, can you see how narrow it becomes? And I will do the same thing here. Now it's much more blade-like. Okay, now we're going back to polygon mode. Select the polygon. Shift E is the hotkey for extrusion, Shift E, and I'm just extruding a little bit more. And now I'm going back to front view, switch to move mode, slightly move it, slightly rotate it, even in this direction. Okay, now what? If you ask me to trace exactly what I have in the background, we can do that. Typical question is how you can select an edge or something that is inside the model. Here comes a practical approach. You can always select the end of the model if you're switching to vertex or edge, but vertex usually is the easiest way to select it and move them. But if you have something inside, you can also choose vertex and grab them as they are. So if you want to move it, you can create this, okay? Or you can actually, we already knew that there is this edge double click option. So you can select edge, double click, it will select everything in a row. And now we can actually move it, rotate it. So if you want to make adjustments to create a curvature, you can select vertices, or good news, double click on the edge, it will select the loop, and now you're good to go, and you can change and make up things. All right, let me just quickly create this. And my goal here is to show something. We're closer to the end of the class. So I want to show you something that's a commonly appearing question, and that is how to model along the center of symmetry. So we will complete this wing, and we will switch to the symmetry issue when we will create the head. So go back. Number 4 is the hotkey for polygon mode. So I'm selecting this polygon. Shift E is for extrusion, front view, and slight rotation. Okay, and perspective, and Shift E, front. Maybe I should scale it down a little bit because we are closer to the end. And perspective, Z to zoom in. Z is a very good tool. So when you have something selected and you want to focus onto that item, just press Z and it will bring it back in the front. So I use it a lot. If it's too close, just use the scroll and just keep a distance from there. But it's a great help if you want to find where you are. So Shift E to extrude, and again, move it, tilt, and here I will select edge and move this edge in the 3D space to make it a little bit more pointy. Okay, so this is how it looks, right? Okay, so can you see now the subdivision modeling helps me to create this nice flow. This is a thin edge-like wing, and the only thing I made is a couple of segments. It is not the fastest way, but when you have something that's really low in the resolution, it's much easier to create the rig for animation. It's much easier to create the UVs, to flatten it out, and later on create textures. Okay, so you can save a lot of time when you have a well-prepared model. Okay, now it is time to switch to the head area. Where's the head? Of course, it is here at the top. Now, why do we care about this? The reason is because when you extrude something, extrusion, so if you have a surface, extrusion will generate polygons on all sides. So as you pull it out, of course, you have a top polygon, but you have all side polygons. Now, why do we care about this? Let me show you. Here is the polygon. Let me go to extrude and extrude it out. And as you see, despite I have an empty cavity of the figure, extrusion cannot recognize that I have an empty edge, or so it's not a closing edge, and will create the polygons anyway. Okay, why do we care about this? Because if you remember about the perpendicular alignment of extrusion, what I did with the arms up and down, if the polygons, let me show this, if the polygons of the neck slightly angled and you extrude it, this is what happens. You will end up creating two extrusions and these can't weld together. All right. If you want to create two-headed penguins, that's up to you. It's absolutely doable. But we are not here with the freak show. So what we ought to do is try to match up things and fix this before we are moving on and creating more details on the head. So one way to fix this is to select the polygons and making sure that you see the end result. Okay, it's not guesswork. You have to have some kind of feedback. So if you have the show end results toggle turned on, you will be able to see the feedback, and it will be much easier. Selection is there. So what I have to do is to move along the x-axis, pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it, until it starts welding. But if I'm too aggressive with the weld, if it's not enough, it may can create like these kind of irregular shapes. So this can create kind of a suction cups here and there. So this is why we're turning this off and selecting the polygons, making sure that these are deleted. We're going to the front view and we're selecting the points, vertices, and if you remember, we can zero out these. So X position is available here at the bottom with the coordinates. So you can press a right click and then it will set these points to 0. Same thing here, right click, set to 0. There's another point behind, so right click, set it to 0. And even another one, hey. Okay, now let me look what's happening. Now, because every point is aligned properly, the neck area is quite a promising one. Okay, so whenever you create something, legs, tails, fins, horns, whatever, along symmetry, if your goal is to keep them as one unit, you have to pay attention to keep the geometry on the center of mirror, on the mirror plane. Okay, so that's it. Just a second. Okay, so basically that's how we roll. And usually what you have to take care of is to build fairly slow. And when you have a geometry, it's much better if the geometry is fairly low. So if you start cranking up geometry and then pushing and inserting more and more and more and more, as you see, it can accidentally create a lot of new edges and polygons. This is one thing you have to keep in mind, that do not create too early too many polygons. Another technique that is commonly used is if you are not sure about the final outcome, you should split up the model. So we will follow this penguin next time to complete and create the legs and head and everything. But but we are not necessarily have to model everything as one single unit. So if you have a figure and you can split the heads and create the head separately, or you have clothing, or you have different props, shoes, whatever, even if it's an animal, you can create that.